In today's video, we're going to talk about the Chicago Bulls and about how they can try to improve their team in the offseason and look at potential moves, targets, trade scenarios, and all these different things in order to see what the Bulls can do to improve their team. Let's get into it. So Chicago obviously made the trade last year to get Nikola Vucevic. They were able to go and be able to draft or trade some draft capital to Orlando. Maybe a little bit too much, in my opinion, with giving up their first rounder this year, which ends up being the number 8th pick. And I can understand why they did it. Ultimately, they're getting an all-star center in Vucevic, but maybe a little bit enough for me to kind of wince a little bit at trading that kind of draft capital. So while they didn't make the playoffs, I do feel like they're a team that's going to be contending for the playoffs this year. But let's look at kind of their cap sheet here and see what we can find with them and what they can do and what to expect. So the first thing to notice here is that, and I kind of just want to address a little bit of the elephant in the room with Lauri Markkanen. Markkanen is a guy who lost a lot of minutes during the season. He started off, playing, starting, doing well. And then as the season went on, after they got Vucevic, his minutes tailed off. And, it just was not good for him to be a part of the team. And, I think with him having so many different coaches, I think he was under Hoiberg, Boylan, and now Billy Donovan. So I just feel like he's a guy who maybe has struggled to kind of get a footing in the NBA, but he's got potential. Stretch 4, a guy who can shoot. I just don't think his home is in Chicago, and honestly, I don't think the Bulls really want to bring him back anyway. I would be shocked to see a team, send him an offer sheet and then the Bulls to match it. I just don't think that's going to happen. Another thing to kind of keep in mind is that they have non-guaranteed contracts for both Thaddeus Young and Thomas Satoransky. So Satoransky, I think, probably is gone. But I also think that Thaddeus Young will probably come back, but could potentially be a trade piece for the future as well. Other than that, they don't really have any pressing needs as far as like returning players. I think their trade candidate out of everything is going to be Al-Farouq Aminu, $10 million. I think there's probably a team that needs some length, a little bit of rebounding, and some forward that can help their team. Patrick Williams is another name. I personally was not high on him in the draft. I actually thought he wasn't probably in the top 10 worthy, but I do understand kind of seeing the potential of him. He plays defense. It looks like he's still kind of learning the game on offense a little bit, but he was a good player. Now, top 3 worthy, I guess we'll see in the coming years, but interesting. One of the pressing needs that the Bulls have is that they have they need a point guard. Levine obviously is their star guard, but to be able to pair a point guard with him would probably be very ideal for this team to kind of target. Levine and Kobe White, that duo just doesn't really fit. While Levine's not like a great defender, Kobe White is definitely not a great defender. Was very inconsistent with his shot this year. And, when he was on, he looked pretty good. But then when he was off, it just wasn't, worth playing him. So I think White's a guy that you can probably bring off the bench, be a spark off the bench and, have him play that kind of role against second unit guys. But in the meantime, they do need to figure out a point guard. And I've mentioned this in other videos, is that, the point guard market is so huge. It's got a lot of people. Kyle, just talking about free agents, Kyle Lowry, Chris Paul, Mike Conley, Dennis Schroeder, Spencer Dinwiddie, Lonzo Ball. You have these guards that you can definitely send money to. Will Chicago try to get an offer sheet out to Ball? Maybe. But the other thing that's important to note here is that they're also trade candidates. Kemba, Eric Bledsoe, now that he's in Memphis and probably isn't going to stay there long term. There is potential that things can happen. The one thing that I think is interesting for the Bulls, though, is that because they don't have their draft pick, I don't know exactly what they can do to upgrade the team. Right now, they are over the cap. They won't be able to. I don't really believe they're going to be able to re-sign, or sorry, just free agency in general. I don't think they're going to be able to find anybody out there. So free agency is interesting for them. I think they're going to kind of say that team that we had at the end of last season, we're going to try to roll with it, and obviously add some depth and other pieces with the little cap space that they'll have. But then also the Zach LaVine extension talk is something that's actually really important. LaVine could technically decline to sign anything until next offseason when he's unrestricted. And you always worry about when your guy is unrestricted because there is always the feeling he could leave. And it's totally, out of your control. That being said, the Bulls, I think, will look to try to restructure his contract to be able to pay him before the season starts and get him extended and just not have to worry about next year's free agency. Here's a look at their draft capital the next few years. They got their picks, and ultimately they'll be pretty fine. But giving Orlando a pick might not have been the greatest. But again, they targeted Vucevic, and so you got to give them credit. They got their guy in the end. Let's look at some rumors here before we sign off on the Bulls. This is a rumor that was interesting to me is that apparently Dennis Schroeder, and again, this is coming from Brian Windhorst, so I'm not quite sure how much I can believe it. But I would say this. Dennis Schroeder has a connection with Billy Donovan because of his time in Oklahoma City, of their time in Oklahoma City, and there is potential of him going there. I don't know if Schroeder is the best guard, best starting point guard. I think he's best served as a backup. And so that being said, I think he could provide value to the Bulls. I just don't know, on the defensive end, but I just don't know, how great of a fit it is. I'm just not a huge Schroeder fan, especially after this last year. Watching him disappear in the Sun series. Obviously, he plays defense, and you got to give him credit there. But at some point, you can't be a liability on defense, and you can't be shooting horrible percentages from the field when you do play and be inconsistent. So that was the biggest thing with Schroeder's inconsistency. I think he's better served to coming off the bench, playing with second unit, but they already kind of have that in a Kobe White. But Kobe White doesn't play defense, so give or take on the Schroeder situation with Chicago. Other than that, I'm not really seeing too much else. I know some of it's LaVine going for the Olympics. Pricey point guard summer upgrade. Yeah, I mean, they know it. Again, Lowry, Schroeder, Lonzo Ball, Spencer Dinwiddie, they know, Chicago knows that they're going to have to pay a point guard for the future. Now, is that an older guy like Lowry, is a semi-older player like Schroeder, is a young player like Lonzo? Who is it? We'll see. But a lot of other teams are going to try to get point guards, so it'll be interesting to see kind of where Chicago lands on that. But other than that, that is it for the Bulls. We're going to make these last two videos, the Thunder and the Cavaliers. Definitely stay tuned for those. And then tomorrow we will be doing the rest of the NBA and breaking down potential off-season moves and targets for the other half of the NBA. The half that made the playoffs and we're a little bit more familiar with. But yeah, let's move on and we'll go to the next stream.